He was a great student to work with. He was very funny. He was very energetic. He loved to play and he loved to joke around.
The city of Dixon in Tennessee evolved from a small settlement into a bustling city. The area was originally inhabited by Native American tribes before European settlers arrived in the late 18th century. The city of Dixon itself was founded in 1861, around the same time the Nashville and Northwestern Railroad extended its tracks through the area. The arrival of the railroad was a critical factor in the city's development, facilitating the transportation of goods and people and thus promoting economic growth. Like many southern towns and cities, Dixon was affected by the Civil War. The city's strategic location along the railroad made it a target for Union forces, and it saw skirmishes and occupations during conflict. After the war, the city, along with the rest of the South, underwent a period of reconstruction. The economy slowly recovered, and the railroads continued to play a vital role in the area's economic life. Today, the city of Dixon is known for its charming small-town atmosphere. It's located about 41 miles away from Nashville, making it the perfect commuter town. The Sheriff's Department is located downtown, and at about 6:30 a.m. on the 4th of April 2018, the phone at the dispatch centre buzzed. Dispatcher Chelsea Lampley was on duty that morning, and she picked up the phone.
Where's your emergency?
Yes, this is Dixon County 911?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I live on 1112 Garners Creek Road, and my son has escaped and we cannot find him.
Okay, how old is your son, sir?
He is 5.
Okay, you said you live at 1112?
He has autism. Yes.
Okay, and you said he has autism?
Yes.
Okay, how long ago was he last seen?
Last night.
On the other end of the line was a man named Joseph Daniels. He reported that his nonverbal, autistic 5-year-old son, Joe Clyde, had vanished.
All right, and what's his name?
His name is Joe.
What's his last name?
Daniels.
What was he wearing last night?
He was wearing pajamas.
What kind of pajamas? What do they look like?
I tell you what, my wife would know better than I would on that.
Okay. Do you know how he got out of the house?
He must have unlocked the door.
Okay.
And he got out.
What's his date of birth?
7/30/12.
Joseph said that he went to wake Joe up for school that morning at 5:20 a.m, only to find that he was gone. He and his wife Crystal searched their home and surrounding vicinity for about an hour before they called police. Joe Clyde Daniels was born to parents Joseph and Crystal on the 30th of July 2012. From an early age, it was clear that Joe was different from the other children. Nonverbal and eventually diagnosed with autism, he faced unique challenges. There were certain things in life that were difficult for Joe, such as loud noises, especially thunder, which terrified him. Yet his love for life and passion for learning shone brightly. As a student at Centennial Elementary, Joe built a special bond with Jessica Donnerstag, the speech-language pathologist. She described him as a great student. He was very energetic and made a lot of progress.
He was a great student to work with. He was very funny. He was very energetic. He loved to play and he loved to joke around. He really took instruction well. He enjoyed doing the activities that we were doing, and he was making he made a lot of progress. He had a lot of potential.
At school, Jessica was working on speech therapy with Joe. In one video clip she shared, she was teaching him how to count.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's go. Good job.
While often children with autism can be stigmatized as difficult, Joe was a very easy and friendly child. He was always on his very best behaviour. While he was nonverbal, he communicated with facial expressions and gestures. Joe was known as Little Joe to the family and friends. Each Sunday when he arrived at Hillview Baptist Church with his 2 brothers and aunt, the congregation would greet him with warm smiles and shout out, "Hello, Little Joe." They knew that he wouldn't reply, but his face always told them that he was happy to be there. The pastor's daughter, Maddie Smart, recalled, "Every week, when Little Joe got there, he would always come running through the back door. He was so lively and energetic. He would always come running in and he would run up and hug the pastor. We all knew that when he came in, he would be excited." The Daniels family lived in a modest, cramped home along Garners Creek Road in Dixon. The small house was a tight squeeze for Joe, his parents Joseph and Crystal, and his 2 brothers, Alex and Noah. But the space was further crowded by Joe's grandparents, Big Joe and Belle, who also called the house their home. Big Joe was a long-haul truck driver and the family's sole breadwinner. Despite his grueling work schedule, he always made time for his grandson Joe. The bond between the 2 was unbreakable, a unique connection that stood out to everybody who met them. Each evening when Big Joe returned from his trips, the first thing he would do was seek out Little Joe. The search for Joe began at the family's home, along Garners Creek Road in Dixon. with detectives hoping that Joe may have found a hidden spot within the familiar surroundings. Every room, closet, and potential hiding place was meticulously checked, but it was abundantly clear that Joe wasn't in the home. Joseph described the moment he discovered his son was missing.
I got up that morning. I got his clothes and Alex's clothes. I went back there to put the coffee table was moved. And I was thinking, okay, maybe he got up in the night and was playing with his toys or something like that. So I put the clothes on the table. I went in there and he was gone. He wasn't in the bed. I took the door, the lock was on the door, it was nowhere to be found. So I took, I woke Crystal up, I woke Alex up, I woke my aunt up as well, but she just went back to sleep. Crystal got dressed, I got dressed. I went outside and looked around for a little bit, my neighbor's yard, to see if he was over there. And I didn't go next door because, I looked over there and I didn't see him next door. I went back in the house. Me and Alex went, and I took the car, went down the street a little bit, and turned back around. I got Alex and went around, and then I called my dad and said, hey, I can't find Joe. I called the police about 6:30.
From the home, the search expanded outwards. Garners Creek Road was rural, just on the outskirts of Dixon, and was surrounded in fields and woodland. Joe couldn't have wandered into the city from the family's home, but he could have been anywhere in the nature that surrounded it. With their eyes scanning the vicinity, the detectives moved slowly and called out Joe's name, well aware that they might not receive a verbal response. Every now and then, one of the detectives would pause and listen intently for any sound that might lead them to Joe. As the hours passed with no sign, the search area was widened. The detectives mapped out grids to ensure that no area was overlooked, and they searched the 2-mile radius surrounding the family's home. But there was no sign of Joe. His father, Joseph, went out in the car with Detective Sarah McCartney and another detective in search of him. He told them the same thing he had said to the 911 operator, that he woke up that morning to find his son missing. However, he then said something else, as recalled by Detective McCartney.
I know when I got woke up in the middle of the night that he had peed on the floor, but I didn't spank him, scream at him, or anything. I just went back to bed.
Okay.
The comment struck the detectives as odd, but not overly suspicious. Detective McCartney questioned if there was something he wanted to tell them. Joseph replied, "Nothing happened that I know of. No one screamed at him. No one yelled at him. Nobody did anything to him, you know. Just let him go to sleep as normal." After driving around for several hours with no sign of Joe, Joseph returned home and waited by the door. The next morning, as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, the search intensified. Sniffer dogs were brought in, and their handlers led them through the area, allowing them to pick up and follow any trails. In the skies, helicopters joined the search, providing a bird's-eye view of the landscape. That same morning, Dixon County Sheriff Jeff Bledsoe asked those who lived in the area to check any outdoor surveillance cameras or game cameras for sightings of Joe. He described the little boy as 4 feet tall with blonde hair and blue eyes. And when he was last seen by his parents, he was dressed in black pajamas with a skeleton design. Detectives knew that time was truly of the essence, as it is with every missing child. But since Joe was non-verbal, they feared that if he had have wandered off, he wouldn't approach anybody for help. After another unfruitful day of searching for Joe, the community got involved. About 400 people showed up to the Friendship Baptist Church to assist in the search for Joe. Donations came in for the volunteers in droves, as people handed out ponchos and hand warmers for the chaotic search ahead. Among the volunteers was Joe's uncle, William Nicholson, who commented, "He's out here all alone, scared, and probably hungry. We need everybody who can come out here. Please help out and try save this little boy. Try to find him and get him back home with his loved ones." Family friend Lindsay Este was also there helping out. She stated in the media, "If it's at night time, it's dark and he's scared, and he's running or whatever the situation. He could be terrified right now. So much open land and ponds. It's hard to even fathom the situation." During the search, some volunteers were scouring the south side of Garner's Creek, which wasn't too far from the family's home. Here, they discovered a child-sized footprint. Immediately, sniffer dogs were brought to the area, and they were able to pick up a scent, which they followed to a nearby pond, where it dropped off. The detectives arranged for the small pond to be drained, fearing that Joe had fallen in and drowned. But once the water disappeared, nothing of interest was found, leaving detectives back at square one. The search pressed on, and detectives received a tip from a local man. He said that he saw a child walking along the side of the road, not too far away from the family's home. This was at about 1 a.m., 5 hours before Joe was reported missing.
And where was the person standing?
On the side of the road.
Side of the road. And what was the person wearing?
Looked like a rib cage, like a skeleton rib cage on their clothes, but I couldn't tell
Okay.
anything else.
And could you tell how far off the road they were standing?
Pretty close to the road, like maybe a couple feet.
Okay. In your statement, did you say how far they were standing off the road?
Yeah.
What did you say in your statement?
10 to 15 feet. Yeah.
However, he said that he believed that the child was older than Joe, and didn't think to call police at the time. This reported sighting gave way to a terrifying theory. What if Joe was abducted after he left the family home? Over at the family's home, Joseph and Crystal were being cared for by members of the sheriff's department, who described them as being exhausted and anguished. They had been told by detectives that they couldn't partake in the search because their scent could throw off the sniffer dogs. Joe's father, Joseph, spoke with News 2 over the phone and said he was afraid that his son was lonely, tired, scared, and confused. He referred to him as Baby Joe, something the entire family called him, and said that he had snuck out of the home before. However, it was always during the day, and Joe would always be found nearby. He never wandered off too far, and he certainly didn't go into the dense forest that surrounded the family's neighbourhood. Joseph said he believed that his son had seen them unlock their padlock door and was able to copy them. He suggested that Joe woke in the middle of the night, unlocked the door, and then left. He and Crystal considered it possible that Joe left that night in search of his grandfather, who was at work driving his truck and who he was extremely close with. But what happened to him after that was a complete and utter mystery. However, it remained a mystery for only a few more hours, until a shocking confession was made. Its truth was much more horrific than anybody could have ever imagined. Detectives searching for Joe had become suspicious of his father, Joseph. The comments he made in the vehicle had weighed heavily on their minds. He was brought in for questioning, and he denied any involvement in his son's disappearance.
There's really only two thoughts I have. There's two ways I can go. Is that something happened with Joe, little Joe, and I'm pretty certain that's him peeing. And I think things probably got out of control. Things you may have lashed out. You may have not, maybe you didn't realize what all was going on, but you ended up getting into a situation where you had a kind of a lapse of judgment, right? And you next thing you know, you're in a situation where your emotions have taken over and taken control, and you end up hurting little Joe. The other side of this is that you're and this is more of a predatorial person who is seeking out to inflict pain on children. I don't think that's you.
No.
I don't see you as that person, and I never have. I don't want to believe that that's you. But when you leave stuff out and you don't tell me exactly what happened, and you're not honest about it.
I'm being honest,
Joe. But when you're not being honest about what happened throughout that night, and you're leaving stuff out, I have to kind of, that leaves it up to me to choose which one of these I see you and believe in you in. And I don't want to believe that you're that predator, but when you don't tell me what happened, I don't really have a choice.
However, after several hours, he seemingly had a change of heart, and the conversation took a dark turn. According to Joseph, he had never believed that Joe was his biological son. He referred to him as that boy. He said he believed that Crystal had been cheating on him, and they had gotten into an argument the night that Joe disappeared. But that wasn't the catalyst that set him off that night. He said he was awoken that night by his stepson, Alex, who said that Joe had urinated on the floor. According to Joseph, I was just so angry with him. He said that he went into the bedroom and hit Joe with a closed fist several times, in the head and a few times in the face.
What hand were you beating him with?
Right hand.
With a closed fist?
Yeah.
Did you hit him with your left hand closed fist in him?
No.
You held him with your left hand? He was crying pretty loud?
Yeah.
Where was he bleeding from?
His legs.
He was bleeding from his legs? From what?
We beat him. He laid on the table.
Laying on the table?
Just scratched. He had cut his leg on the table.
He cut his leg on the table and you
I didn't see any blood though. When I woke up that morning, I didn't see any blood.
So he was bleeding from his leg, from the table, and you were beating him, closed fist, hitting his body. How many times you hit him in the head?
A couple times.
Couple times?
After the beating, he said he realised that his son wasn't breathing. Joseph told detectives that after his son was dead, he placed his body in the trunk of the car. He then drove to a truck stop about 9 miles away and threw his body off a bridge into the water. However, he then changed this portion of the story. He said that he actually drove Joe's body out to a field and covered him in grass. He stated, "He's in that field. I know it's a big field, but he's in that field." After the confession, Detective Trevor Daniel placed Joseph into a van and asked him to point out the location where he disposed of his son's body. They drove around for 5 hours, and Joseph pointed out a number of locations. However, Joe's body couldn't be found at any of them. During the trip, Joseph made some random comments. He said he wanted him to be happy and that he wanted to tell his wife he was sorry. He spoke about his stepson, Alex, commenting, "Alex is a good boy. He isn't a liar. I guess he won't be my stepson anymore." Once more, Joseph changed his story and said that Joe's body was actually in a pond somewhere. They drove all throughout the night, but Joe's body couldn't be located. Upon their return to the police station, Joseph Daniels was charged with the first-degree murder of his son. As news of Joseph's arrest spread throughout the small community, a wave of shock and disbelief rippled through the residents. Neighbours, friends, and even strangers banded together, searching tirelessly, driven by a shared hope of bringing the little boy home safely. But it was now clear that Joe wasn't coming home. As details of the case emerged, a sombre silence fell over the city. Conversations in grocery stores, schools and cafes were hushed, tinged with a mixture of grief and bewilderment. Parents held their children a little closer, and the community's sense of security was irrevocably altered. One neighbour, Chloe Rodriguez, commented, "I saw the story on the news and it broke my heart, because I have 2 kids myself. I wanted to be here to help to support the family, and come to find out, it was the family." Friendship Baptist Church, which had served as a staging area for the search effort, announced a 5 minutes of silence on Sunday, ahead of a special prayer service for Joe. Maddie Smart, the pastor's daughter at Hillview Baptist Church, also said she wanted to build a memorial playground outside the church in Joe's memory. Joe was well known in the church and attended each Sunday with his brothers and aunt. Maddie commented, "I just want people to think about what a lively little boy that he was, not the tragic situation that happened to him. I want people to remember little Joe as he was, not the boy who was killed." The church also sent out a message to members which read, "Hillview will be having their normal services tomorrow, just as little Joe would remember them. The church family is in a time of mourning. We will have a designated time of prayer on behalf of the Daniels family. The whole church family, especially his friends in his Sunday school, will miss his smiling face and him humming along to the hymns. Little Joe has been at Hillview since he was born, so please keep the Daniels family and the church family in your prayers." The arrest of Joseph and his confession meant that the search for Joe had now transformed into a murder investigation and a search for his body. TBI Deputy Director Jason Locke commented, "The search continues this morning for Joe Clyde's body. Though this news is profoundly disappointing, we feel grateful for the volunteers who gave their time and resources this week to help search." While the community was stunned by Joseph's arrest, they were even more stunned when Joe's mother, Crystal, was arrested on the 9th of April. Detectives accused her of knowing that Joe was being abused and knew that he had been killed, yet failed to report it. In fact, Crystal didn't just know that her son was killed. She was there when it happened. She was charged with 1 count of aggravated child neglect or endangerment. She and Joseph arrived at the court the next morning to hordes of people. As they were led into the courtroom, chants of "Where is baby Joe?" echoed from a bunch of protesters. Among the crowd was a local man named Dutch Bryant, who had brought along a microphone. He commented in the media that Joseph and Crystal were hurting the city of Dixon by not revealing where Joe's body was. He stated, "The discovery of his body will allow us to put him in a resting place where the community can heal and mend. This will be a stain on our county that will be hard to scrub off." Another local, Amanda Sanders, said that the community needed to stand up and be a voice for Joe, who had his voice taken from him. Inside the courtroom, when Crystal was asked if she understood the charges against her, she replied, "I guess." During the court hearing, it was revealed that Crystal was arrested after she confessed to detectives that she was present when her son was killed. She said that the night before they reported Joe missing, she had heard him screaming from the bedroom. Crystal said she went into the bedroom and found Joseph on top of Joe with a closed fist. Joe was motionless. She said that Joseph then swung at her and told her that if she ever said anything, he would kill her. Instead of protect her son or call for help, Crystal simply left the room and went back to sleep. The next morning, when Joe was reported missing, she never mentioned what she had seen. They were both remanded into custody as the search for Joe's body continued. The Dixon County Sheriff's Office made an announcement and said they needed volunteers to lead the largest search yet for Joe. They were seeking people who had emergency services backgrounds and those who were capable of leading large groups of volunteers over mixed terrain. Close to 500 people showed up for the search, scanning the ground in line formation. They covered 5,000 acres, including dense brush and steep terrain. The temperature reached close to 90 degrees, but despite the exhaustive search, no trace of Joe was found. As the community grappled to make sense of what had happened, news reports started coming out about the Daniels family, especially what life inside their home may have been like. Just days before Joe was reported missing, the Humane Society of Dixon County were called by a Dixon County resident. She had found 2 dogs on her property who were extremely malnourished, covered in fleas and ticks, and were terrified. The dogs showed all the classic signs of having been abused. The agency soon learned that the dogs belonged to Joseph and Crystal, but they had been found 9 miles away. According to the Humane Society, the couple had driven to the location and simply abandoned the dogs. By now, detectives had learned that the marriage between Joseph and Crystal was falling apart. They had obtained search warrants for their cell phones, and it was clear that Crystal was planning on leaving Joseph. In fact, Crystal had a boyfriend in Kansas, and in the days leading up to Joe's disappearance, she told him that she had ripped up their marriage license. In a message to Thomas Richards, she had written, "If it tells you anything, I ripped up our marriage license and I went and had the papers drawn up. All that has to be done is him sign them, and then the papers had been filed in the court." She then added, "I haven't been happy for the last 3 years, before the conversation became sexual in nature." There was a reference to a sexual encounter with Thomas that also involved Joseph. It was also clear that Joseph didn't believe that Joe was his biological son. Just days before he went missing, he had searched the term anonymous parental test. As the case made its way through the justice system, the search for Joe's body continued. In June, a renewed search took place with the help of 40 members of the Texas EcuSearch team. The group of volunteers had conducted more than 1,500 searches in 42 states, and the search for Joe was now the top of their list. They started out at the family's home and fanned out from there. They even used 2 power paragliders to check fields and ponds, but once more there was no trace of Joe anywhere. The next month, Hillview Baptist Church celebrated what would have been Joe's 6th birthday. The celebration included food, cake, and a balloon release. His parents were in attendance, along with Sheriff Bledsoe. The months continued to trickle past, and searches still pressed on, but Joe's body couldn't be found. In October, his grandparents received a handwritten note which claimed that he was alive and that Crystal had given him away. The letter included several names of people who were allegedly involved and suggested that Joe was possibly in Jackson, Tennessee. Detectives immediately dismissed the letter, since both Joseph and Crystal had confessed that he was dead. But they still looked into it, and they soon learned that the letter was actually written by Joseph from jail. By this stage in the investigation, he had been evaluated and was found to be mentally competent, meaning that he would be proceeding to trial. But before then, it was decided by the judge that while Joseph and Crystal would be standing trial in the county, an outside jury would be brought in. As the trial was approaching, Crystal recanted the statement she made to detectives that she had witnessed Joseph standing over Joe with a closed fist. Her incriminating statement was key to the prosecution, as there was very limited physical evidence in the case. There was only a missing boy and 2 confessions. According to Crystal, she wasn't on her medication at the time and had felt pressured by detectives to make what she referred to as a false confession. As a matter of fact, Joseph himself had already recanted his confession, which meant that the prosecution's case was going to be a struggle. Furthermore, there was still some strange aspects about the case and questions that lingered. Joseph claimed he killed Joe at about midnight, but a man saw a boy standing outside alone close to 1 a.m. It wasn't made public during the initial search, but this wasn't the only reported sighting of Joe after he disappeared. At about 8 a.m. that same morning, 2 women at a convenience store were sure they saw Joe there. He was travelling with an older man with salt and pepper beard, hair and moustache. The man was driving a white school bus that was converted into an RV with either Massachusetts or Wisconsin tags. The store manager told detectives that the boy was nonverbal. He didn't talk or react to her smile and looked at her with a blank stare. She also said that he was wearing boots that were similar to boots that Joe often wore, and boots that were missing from the home. After the store manager became aware of Joe's disappearance, she reached out to detectives and said she was sure that she saw him. She called them back 2 days later to remind them. The woman was never asked for any surveillance of the man and child, at least not by detectives. The first person to properly speak with her was Joseph's defence attorney, Jake Lockhart, but by then, the tape had been recorded over. Defence attorney Lockhart professed his client's innocence in the media and said that there was evidence to prove that his confession was false. He said that a neighbour's surveillance camera showed that his car never left the property that night, yet Joseph claimed he put his son's body in the car to dispose of it. Speaking of the detectives, the defence attorney stated, "I think what they did when they got a confession was shut the case down. They were looking for a body, but not a live boy." The trial for Joseph Daniels began on the 3rd of June 2021, and he was standing trial separate from his wife, Crystal. District Attorney Ray Crouch was the first to take the podium before the jury.
Joe Clyde Daniels is 5 years old. You're going to see a video, probably the last video of Joe Clyde Daniels alive, from April the 3rd of 2018, when he gets off the school bus at the end of the day. He exits with his older brother Alex, who was 8 years old at the time. They get off the school bus. Their Aunt Joyce is waiting to greet them at the end of the driveway. And that's the last time we have evidence of him being alive on photograph or video. You're going to see proof that Joe Clyde was an active young boy. He loved going to school. He went to school at Centennial Elementary in Dixon. Joe Clyde loved his cowboy boots, and he loved his plaid button-up shirts, and you're going to see those. Joe Clyde loved playing with his friends at schools, and he loved the one-on-one interaction from his school teachers.
He then laid out the prosecution's case. He said that during Joseph's 4-hour confession, he admitted to slamming Joe's body onto a coffee table after he urinated on the floor of his bedroom.
And what he tells law enforcement is that he had discarded the body by placing it in the trunk of the car, that he had driven to a truck stop approximately 9 miles away from his house. He stopped at the truck stop. The Joe Clyde's body was in the trunk of the car. He went into Love's, bought something, and then took the body and threw it off of a bridge into some water. That's the third confession. They get the defendant out of the jail at his request and take him to multiple bridges to see if he can show them exactly which one. And he continues to lie.
Defense attorney Jake Lockhart said during his opening statements that the confession was coerced. He described his client as mentally ill and said that he was told by detectives that they weren't going to stop the interrogation until he told them what they wanted to know.
And as you watch the confession, you can see him gradually start realizing, I'm going to have to tell them what they want to hear if this is going to be over. Keep in mind, my client's mentally ill. And so you can see in his face, he gradually starts realizing, and at first he thinks he's in trouble because they forgot to lock the door. And so he tells them that Joe Clyde scooted the coffee table over and took the lock off the latch. It's possible that he scooted the coffee table over, and we don't contend that he had the motor dexterity to unlock the lock. We do contend that he would have been able to take an unlocked lock off the latch and just lift it out. But you'll see that was not enough. So they stayed on him, and then he moved to saying, well, I took it off and I put him outside. And then I went out and got him, brought him back in, and I spanked him more. And at first he tells them he did pee in the floor, and I just told him to get back in bed. But that wasn't enough for law enforcement. They wanted something more.
Lockhart said that Joseph told detectives he beat his son to death in the living room, yet no trace of blood was ever found, and the room hadn't been professionally cleaned. The testimony got underway with various people testifying about what Joe was like before he disappeared. His teachers and bus driver only had good words to say about him, describing him as a happy and energetic child who loved school. His school speech therapist, Jessica Donnerstag, testified.
Tell us some of Joe Clyde's likes and dislikes. Start with the likes first.
He loved to eat. We ate a lot in therapy, especially apples, but really anything. He also loved to play games. I saw him individually, and then I also saw him in small groups with other children. And so he really enjoyed interacting with his peers and playing with them.
Did he have any dislikes?
He did. He didn't particularly like really loud noise and a lot of chaos. He liked to be neat. He kind of, he wasn't really into a lot of the messy play. He kind of, if he had something on his shirt, we wiped it off. He enjoyed kind of a calmer atmosphere, I guess.
Okay. What kind of clothes did he like to wear?
He liked to wear his jeans and a little button-down shirt and his boots.
He liked his boots.
He loved his boots.
Were they cowboy boots?
They were kind of yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The square-toed boots.
Detective Sarah McCartney testified about the strange comments that Joseph had made in the car as they drove around searching for Joe. He randomly told her that Joe had urinated on the floor in the night before he vanished, but stressed that he hadn't hit him. She also revealed that while a neighbour's surveillance camera hadn't captured Joseph's car leaving that night, it did show him leave at 6:15 a.m, just before the 911 call. He then returned home at 6:25 a.m. and called police. Further footage from Bethany Retreat House at 7:52 a.m. showed Joseph's vehicle driving south in the direction of Love's truck stop. Joseph had made so many different confessions about what he had done with his son's body, but one did match with the surveillance. He had told detectives that he stopped at Love's truck stop to purchase a Dr. Pepper. He said he then drove over to Hickman County and dropped Joe's body off a bridge. He said he chose to do this because his son loved water. He then returned home at 9:19 a.m. and told people that he'd been in the car searching for Joe. Detective McCartney was cross-examined by the defence attorney, and she admitted that she didn't see any blood inside the family's home. When Sheriff Jeff Bledsoe testified, he also admitted that there was no direct evidence that would indicate that Joe was murdered, or even dead. He said that the search efforts were very extensive and meticulous, and that every single tip they received was followed up on. However, there was no evidence that actually proved that Joe was dead. After he stepped down, the courtroom fell to a hushed silence, as Joe's 11-year-old half-brother, Alex, took to the witness stand. He was going to serve as the prosecution's lead witness, and he had a very disturbing story to share.
Did anything strange happen that night?
Not too strange, but it was a bit strange.
Okay. Well, tell us about that.
Well, he had come in there and beat him. He did.
The defendant?
Yeah.
Okay. Did Joe Clyde get out of bed?
Oh, yeah, he peed in the floor.
He did?
Yeah.
Did you see him pee in the floor?
Yes.
Do you know about what time that was?
9. It was around 9.
It was just after y'all had gone to bed?
Yeah. We weren't asleep yet, but we were in the bed.
Okay. Well, when you say that he peed in the floor, was that in the bedroom?
In the bedroom, yeah.
Okay. And after Joe Clyde peed in the floor, what did you do?
I went and told.
Told who?
Him.
And when you're pointing at him, you're pointing at the defendant.
Yeah.
And when you went and told the defendant, where was the defendant?
In his room.
In his bedroom? Who was in the bedroom with him?
Crystal.
Now, were they awake or asleep?
Awake.
They were both awake? What were they doing?
Talking, watching TV.
Okay. And after you told the defendant that Joe Clyde had peed in the floor, what happened?
He went in there and beat him, like I said.
He did what?
He went in there and beat him.
Okay. Well, and then did you go back to bed?
Yeah.
Did Joe Clyde go back to bed?
Yeah.
Alex told the courtroom that they shared the home with Joseph's father and stepmother, but said that they were out of town, so he and Joe had slept in their bedroom the night that Joe disappeared. Sometime during the night, Joe urinated on the floor, so Alex went and woke up Joseph. He said that Joseph stormed into the bedroom and beat Joe with his fists. The brothers then went back to sleep. As Alex tried to explain what happened next, he became overcome with emotion. The judge called for a 15-minute recess, and when they resumed, Alex continued his testimony.
I woke up from a loud thing, and then I didn't go in there immediately, but I sat in there for a couple of minutes, waited. Then I went in there, saw him on the floor. Joseph had beaten. And a couple minutes after that, he took him out the door and laid him down in the yard.
Hey, let me stop you right there.
He said that he woke up in the middle of the night to a loud bang that sounded like a thump. According to the prosecution, this was Joseph beating Joe again. They theorised that he had slammed his son off the coffee table in the living room. Alex stayed in the bedroom for a few minutes before he went into the living room, where he saw Joe lying on the floor. Alex testified that he then witnessed Joseph carry Joe out of the back door.
I opened the door slowly, and then I put my foot out and my other foot out.
Out onto that back deck area?
Mm-hmm. I tiptoed down the stairs.
What did you see?
I hadn't saw nothing yet until I got to the edge of the house.
Edge of the house? What did you see then?
I saw him lay Joe down, like he was already laid down. But he was on there on his knee, looking around. But then a couple minutes after that, he saw me.
Who saw you?
Joseph.
The defendant?
Yes.
He saw you?
Yes.
Peeking around the corner?
Yes.
Alex said that after Joseph spotted him, he threatened to kill him if he didn't help. Alex told the courtroom that he opened up the door and the trunk of the car, after which Joseph told him to go back inside. Instead, Alex hid and continued to watch.
Then he said never mind him to go back into the house. Then he walked down the driveway. Then I hid behind the edge of the house again. I went up on the porch, but then went back down.
So, the defendant started walking down the driveway?
Yes.
What had he done with Joe Clyde?
He had him in his arms.
He had him in his arms as he was walking down the driveway?
Yes.
And what did you do?
I was watching him.
Okay. And what happened next?
Then whenever he got to the road and started walking down a little ways, I walked up the driveway.
You walked up the driveway?
Mm-hmm.
What did you see?
I saw him walking down the road with him.
Carrying Joe Clyde?
Yes.
The next morning, Alex awoke and was told by Joseph that his little brother had run away from home. The jury were then shown a videotaped interview with Alex from the 5th of April 2018. He was at the Child Advocacy Centre and was accompanied by a therapy dog. He told Jessica Teekert with the Child Advocacy Centre a different story than what he had just testified. He said that Joseph had calmly and quietly entered the room after Joe urinated on the floor and told Joe to go back to sleep. He said that sometime later, Joe woke him up, and he said he put him back to sleep by turning the TV and noise off. Alex said that in the morning, Joseph awoke him and said that Joe was missing. Defence attorney Lockhart questioned Alex about the differing versions of events. He said that during his original statement, he was just trying to protect Joseph because he didn't want to get him in trouble. His testimony was followed by Morgan Bowen, a family advocate who was at the Child Advocacy Centre when Alex was spoken to. She said that Joseph had taken Alex there and that she had witnessed a very strange interaction. Joseph had put bunny ears behind his stepson's head and then asked, "How's that for child abuse?" This wasn't the only strange thing that happened. She told the court that in their intake paperwork, the words, "victim accompanied by," were at the top of the page. When Joseph read it, he became upset and commented, "It's not like I abuse my own children." He further commented that he hoped detectives would find that boy, in reference to Joe. Testimony was then presented about Joseph and Crystal's relationship, with various messages presented. These messages showed that Crystal was planning on leaving Joseph in the days leading up to Joe's disappearance. Further testimony was presented by a woman named Jenny Jones. She told the jury that she was sure she saw Joseph Daniels standing on a bridge near Garners Creek Road at 1:30 a.m. the night that Joe disappeared. This would have correlated with the testimony from Alex, who said his father walked down the road in the early morning hours with Joe's body in his arms. After this, the prosecution then rested their case, And surprisingly, the defense chose not to call any witnesses. During closing arguments, the defense argued that the prosecution hadn't proven that Joseph had killed his son, while the state asked the jury not to reward him for concealing Joe's body. Assistant District Attorney Josh Turnbow glanced from juror to juror as he said that Joe had been making good progress. He then added, but that all came to an end on a dark, cold, stormy night. He said it was clear that Crystal was planning on leaving Joseph and suggested she was counting on income she received from Joe's disability to move to another state to be with her boyfriend.
That planted the seed in the defendant's mind. My wife can't leave me without Joe Clyde because she needs the $1,200 a month she gets for his disability to be able to make it.
District Attorney Ray Crouch then added, Joe left that house in his father's own arms after he slammed him into that coffee table. He snapped. He went into a rage and he killed his son. Defense Attorney Matthew Michael argued that the prosecution's case lacked proof, and that detectives had focused on Joseph as the suspect early on and stopped looking into other leads. He stated, they had their confession. They were done. Following the closing arguments, the jury were sent off to deliberate Joseph's fate. They returned with a verdict the following morning. They found Joseph Daniels guilty of the first-degree murder of Joe Daniels. They also convicted him of second-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, filing a false report, and evidence tampering. Outside of court, District Attorney Ray Crouch said that the guilty verdict was not a happy moment. He said that everybody who worked on the case instead felt immense relief. He stated, I don't ever see a conviction as something to celebrate. A conviction is simply the jury identifying and recognising guilt. Inherent in guilt means something bad happened. In this case, it was the murder of a young boy. He then added that until Joe's body was discovered, there would never be full closure. Joseph Daniels returned to court on the 14th of September to be sentenced. During the hearing, probation and parole manager John McGranaham took the stand to talk about his pre-sentence report for Joseph. These included statements Joseph had made about feeling lots and lots of anger, as well as thoughts about killing and threatening other people.
Around age 16, he was referred to a mental health cooperative because he told his stepmother that he wanted to kill her and that he wasn't sleeping. He was about age 19 at that time.
So in going through your assessment and evaluation with the defendant, he's already alluded to several incidences of his anger and outburst as a juvenile?
Yes.
Is that kind of common throughout what you saw in your pre-sentence report?
Yes.
Okay. And then next, Mr. McGranahan, at the bottom of the same page, under alcohol and drug use, what did the defendant tell you regarding his alcohol and drug use?
Well, he said he didn't have an issue with alcohol or drugs. When I asked him questions about his alcohol use, he did admit that he consumed some alcohol. About age 21, when he purchased bottled wine, he would consume vodka every now and then, screwdrivers very rarely. Would consume a glass up to a few shots. Admitted that he would get tipsy, and but he said he would not get super drunk. Mostly favorite drink was cherry vodka. Would consume mostly at celebratory moments such as passing a test or completing tasks, things of that nature.
Joseph had said to the probation and parole manager, I don't remember a lot of it, but apparently I told someone I wanted to eat their face off. The report also included references he had made to planning to kill school peers and bite people's noses off. He had even said he planned on using chemicals to blow up his parents' home. According to Joseph, on another occasion, he had become so angry with his stepmother that he was going to tie her to the bed and beat her. District Attorney Crouch testified that Joseph was a time bomb waiting to go off, and unfortunately it did go off, and he killed baby Joe. He then added, He's ideated on killing folks for 12 years, and it came to fruition. He's a danger, and he's a threat. And he has no regard for human life. He even states to his case manager that he scares himself when he has these homicidal ideations. Joseph's defense attorney, on the other hand, argued that Joseph had supported his family and had no history of criminal convictions. He said, "This was not a premeditated crime. He had post-high school college education and is trying to be a better provider." Judge David Wolf then sentenced Joseph Daniels to life in prison with a minimum sentence of 51 years. In the wake of Joe's murder, laws were changed in the hopes that no other child suffer a fate like he did. In February, it was announced that the Joe Clyde Daniels Act bill had been filed at the state capitol. The bill requires the Board of Parole to consider the extent to which the offender obstructed or continues to obstruct the ability of law enforcement to recover the remains of the victim. This meant that if a killer refuses to share where their victim's body is, then that would be taken into consideration during a parole hearing. Representative Mary Littleton commented, "Joe Clyde touched everyone in our community for months and months, and he's still touching our lives now because we have found no closure. Every person, every child deserves closure and a proper burial." Just the following month, Crystal Daniels entered a no contest agreement just before her trial was ready to begin. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison. While both Joseph and Crystal remain behind bars, Joe's body still remains unrecovered. David Ratter, the director of EcuSearch Midwest, said in April of 2022, "A lot of areas have been covered, and yet here we still are, 4 years later, still looking for the piece of puzzle that we so desperately need and want." Well, besties, that is it for this episode of Morbidology. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I'd like to say a massive thank you to my newest supporters up on Patreon, Stephanie, Stas, and Amy. The support up on there seriously goes such a long way, especially for independent podcasts such as Morbidology, and especially during those months where advertisements are few and far between. So once more, a massive, massive thank you. You can join us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month, and there are absolutely no obligations. You're free to cancel your subscription at any point. I upload ad-free and early release episodes, bonus episodes, behind the scenes, and I also send out a handwritten thank you card along with some cool Patreon exclusive merch. As mentioned before, Morbidology is now up on YouTube. The episodes are presented in a documentary style, along with photographs and videos that are relevant to each case. To tune in, just search for Morbidology up on YouTube, and please hit that subscribe button. Remember to check us out at morbidology.com for more information about this episode and to read some true crime articles. Until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe, and have an amazing week.